The public imagination is fixated on missile plumes and the kinetic cost of a potential war. Analysts note Russia's readiness for conflict, but this is a strategic misdirection. The mathematics of symmetric warfare ensure that a conventionally weaker power cannot afford this exchange. The real blueprint is already operational. Russia's recent attacks on the energy infrastructure of the Odessa region and the foiled cyber attack on Poland's energy grid are not isolated events. They are systemic probes, designed to calibrate the kinetic and political cost of targeting critical Western infrastructure. The decisive vector, however, is not explosive. It is silence. The primary asymmetric threat, according to CSIS assessments, is a coordinated, deniable attack on the two pillars of Western solvency: the global network of undersea fiber optic cables and the satellite constellations that govern GPS and intelligence. This attack vector creates what strategists term a blind leviathan, a superpower possessing overwhelming military force, but with its nervous system severed. Its financial markets freeze, unable to clear transactions. Its military, rendered deaf and blind, is forced onto a launch-on-warning protocol based on absent data, a systemic solvency crisis with a nuclear tripwire. A conventional war is a liquidity event. It is the single largest liability a nation-state can place on its balance sheet. For a conventionally weaker power, engaging a superior adversary symmetrically is not strategy. It is premeditated national bankruptcy. The kinetic cost of matching armor, airframes, and logistics creates an immediate, existential solvency crisis. CSIS analysis confirms this is not a choice, but a mathematical constraint. For a state like Russia, a protracted, symmetric war against an economic bloc like NATO represents a catastrophic domestic liability. An unpopular war drains national reserves, forcing a zero-sum choice between funding the military or funding the state itself. When the cost of bullets competes directly with the cost of bread, the regime's internal solvency is the first casualty. This weakness forces a pivot. The only rational protocol is to bypass the adversary's strength, its military, and attack its systemic vulnerability, its reliance on critical infrastructure. The strategy shifts from a high-cost kinetic-on-kinetic model to a low-cost, high-impact asymmetric vector. You do not try to sink their fleet. You turn off the power to the port that services it. This is the blueprint in operation. We see the direct application in the documented attacks on the energy infrastructure of the Odessa region. We see the probing and testing of this vector in the foiled cyber attacks on Poland's energy systems. The pattern is irrefutable. When a symmetric war guarantees insolvency, the rational actor is forced to escalate asymmetrically. The objective is not to win the war on the battlefield, but to create a liability crisis so profound that the adversary's only options are paralysis or a nuclear launch-on-warning posture. The strategic calculus is no longer about military mass. It is about economic leverage. Analysts at the Royal United Services Institute, or RUSI, have modeled the new economics of lethality. The finding is a mathematical certainty. A $5 million main battle tank, a primary kinetic asset, can be mission-killed by a $500 drone. This is a 10,000 to 1 cost asymmetry. This phenomenon is known as the democratization of violence. Military-grade destructive capability is no longer monopolized by superpowers. It is now commoditized. This allows a weaker adversary to bypass conventional defenses and impose a systemic solvency crisis, where the cost to defend critical infrastructure becomes exponentially higher than the cost to attack it. The primary battlefield is not a physical territory. It is a network. The recent kinetic attacks on Odessa's energy infrastructure are not isolated events. They are a blueprint. The attempted cyber attack on Poland's power grid, subsequently foiled, confirms the protocol. These are not acts of conventional war. According to analysts at RUSI, they are systemic stress tests designed to map vulnerabilities in the Western grid for a coordinated, systemic shock. The vector is critical infrastructure, and the target is financial solvency. The staging ground for these attacks is the gray zone, politically unstable regions that function as proxy laboratories. Reports of potential instability, whether from a foreign travel warning for Canada or unrest in South Africa, are not the cause of conflict. They are symptoms of systemic weakness, monitored by adversaries and catalogued as potential launch pads. An attack originating from a nation deep in domestic crisis provides the perfect shield of plausible deniability, paralyzing a conventional military response. This engineered ambiguity is the core of the strategy. As documented in analysis of the Iran crisis, the U.S. often holds fire precisely because the complex narratives defy simple attribution. This is not indecision. It is a calculated feature of asymmetric deterrence. The stronger power's response protocol is intentionally overloaded with ambiguous data, creating a liability crisis where any kinetic reaction risks triggering a wider, uncontrollable escalation. The attacker weaponizes the opponent's own legal and political constraints. Therefore, the public debate over whether a state like Russia is ready for a symmetric war with NATO is a strategic misdirection. The kinetic cost is prohibitive. The rational vector, as demonstrated in the gray zone, is asymmetric. CSIS analysis confirms the objective is not to defeat a military, but to bankrupt a system. By attacking critical infrastructure from deniable proxies, an adversary bypasses trillions in military spending and forces a zero-sum choice. Accept systemic paralysis or initiate a launch-on-warning exchange over a non-military event. The nuclear command protocol is not a weapon. It is a mathematical function designed to guarantee strategic solvency. The doctrine of launch-on-warning is its core processor. It dictates that if early warning systems confirm an inbound mass kinetic strike, a retaliatory launch is executed before the incoming weapons arrive. The objective is to prevent a decapitation strike from neutralizing response capability. This entire system, however, operates on one assumption: trusted data. The asymmetric vector does not target the missile silos, it targets the data feed. CSIS analysts have modeled this with unnerving precision. A sophisticated cyber attack, a blueprint for which was tested in the foiled attack on Polish energy infrastructure and executed by Russia against the Odessa region, does not need to destroy a satellite. It only needs to blind the radar. This creates the fog of digital war. With the early warning network showing corrupted data or a total blackout, the commander is systemically trapped. The protocol offers a zero-sum choice: launch based on the last valid signal out of fear of decapitation, or wait for a confirmation that may never arrive because your sensors are now inert. The adversary forces your own doctrine to become the primary accelerant toward a nuclear exchange. The Odessa energy grid attacks and the foiled plot in Poland were not isolated events. They were live fire rehearsals. According to CSIS analysis, as adversary capabilities are tested against hardening defenses, the next vector must be physically deniable to bypass tripwires for a kinetic response. The logical calibration shot will therefore target a systemic choke point where digital and physical systems merge. Within the next 12 months, expect a multi-day, cascading blackout at a primary U.S. maritime terminal, the port of Los Angeles or Long Beach. The event will be publicly attributed to a catastrophic SCADA system failure, but its strategic function is to measure the precise economic bleed rate and test the political threshold for a non-attributable solvency crisis.